Pleasure to call to order the 138th meeting of the Massachusetts Gaming Commission, once again at the Boston Convention and Exhibition Center at 10:30 on November 6th. Before we get into the formal agenda, I just wanted to make a few comments since yesterday was a momentous day. Obviously, pardon, day before yesterday, sorry. Yesterday was momentous too.
Yesterday could have been momentous.
We obviously are totally respectful of the outcome of the referendum. We never took a position on the referendum. Our position has always been that if the people of Massachusetts want casinos, which they have said quite emphatically now that they do, that it's our job to implement this quite remarkable law as well as possible and to accomplish two key objectives. One is to maximize the revenues, the jobs, and all of the other economic development impacts that were originally envisioned for this law. So maximize the benefits, and on the other hand, minimize the potential negatives, whether it's traffic or problem gambling or anything else that might be an unintended consequence. That's our job, to fulfill those two objectives as best we possibly can. And we will continue to do that, and we will continue to do that in a way that, as best we possibly can, will be in fact and will be perceived as participatory and transparent and fair. We also, however, are mindful of the fact that although 60% of the people voted in favor of maintaining expanded gaming, 40% voted against it, which is a lot of people. And we consider it our job, I think I speak for all the commissioners, consider it our job to try to win the confidence and trust of everybody in the Commonwealth, proponents and opponents alike, and to be mindful of the legitimate concerns that a lot of people have expressed and that 40% of the people in Massachusetts were very much concerned about. As far as going forward, today's agenda is indicative of the fact that we have a lot to do. It's time to roll up our sleeves. I think all of us have sort of had bated breaths, even though it looks like this was going to be, casino gambling was going to be continued. We even, I think, in our own agency have felt some sense of restraint and concern. That's now off, and it's time for us to really roll up our sleeves and go to work. First and foremost is to see that our three existing licensees, three really first-rate companies, we take real pride that we've got Penn National, MGM, and Wynn Resorts as the licensees in Massachusetts. Due to, I think, the competitive environment that we were able to create and the work that Mayor Sarno and his team did in Springfield, we will be having an investment of $2.7 billion in the Commonwealth to get these three facilities up and running in the next 2 or 3 years. $2.7 billion. We have made a commitment to the public that we will have something like 8,000 to 10,000 construction jobs, 8,000 to 10,000 permanent jobs, $300 million to $500 million in new revenue to the Commonwealth. And job one for us is to make sure that those aspirations are realized because that's the commitment that was made to the people of the Commonwealth. We also have to make a decision on Southeastern Mass, which we'll be talking about today. And it's important for the people there that we figure out how to approach that. We have a major research agenda underway mandated by the legislature. You'll be hearing more about that today also. And we're anxious to have the whole public hear about that as that begins to come to fruition. We have a strong mandate from the legislature and the governor to pay attention to problem gambling. And we are doing that. We will have the resources to attend to it. And as you know, we are debating a very innovative and thoughtful program of how to promote responsible gambling and minimize the downsides of problem gambling. So there's a lot to do, and we look forward to it and are anxious to get to work. One other thing, we are also mindful of the fact that the three elected officials who appointed us, Governor Patrick, Treasurer Grossman, and Attorney General Coakley, are now being replaced. Our three appointing authorities will be new people, and we will be reaching out to them soon to get to know them, to give them a little bit of a briefing on what we're doing and how we're doing it, what our priorities are, what our plans are, and to familiarize them to whatever extent they are interested in our work, since we will now be working with them. Any other comments as we get started from anybody? All right, thank you all. We are anxious to get to work. Item number 2 is approval of the minutes. Commissioner McHugh.
Mr. Chairman, the minutes are in the meeting packet, and I move their acceptance with the typical reservation of rights to correct typographical and mechanical errors. There is, in fact, one misspelling that that I've caught, and I'll
Is
mention
that of Mr. DeSalvio's name?
That would be it.
That would it, okay, yeah, right.
We'll fix that.
We'll fix that.
A couple other name corrections in there, too.
Okay, you can pass those on too.
Can I make a comment, perhaps for minutes going forward? I just remember both presentations from PEN and MGM, which are described and indexed in these minutes, were, at least in my mind, very memorable. There are great things that they were reporting, the tool that MGM is using, the minority and veteran numbers that PEN is achieving. So if we could, for future minutes, include highlights of those things, I would really find that useful. I'm going to assume that not everybody goes from our minutes to our transcript, and if we can get back to some of those summaries on the minutes, that would be very helpful. Not on everything, I think, but the memorable reports would be helpful.
Well, that's a point well taken, and I think we'll be happy to do that. There's a difficulty sometimes in ensuring absolute congruence between the content of the minutes and the content of the transcript, and the latter is always the best evidence of what's said. And so that there is a restraint there, because we do want to make them congruent. But that said, it seems to me your point's well taken, and we'll examine.
And would that be the only place you would be talking about adding more substance? Just sort of the highlights of external presentations like that?
Yes,
'Cause they are-
substantially, yes.
Yeah.
The votes are very well described as a matter of course. I think it's obvious when we take an action. But in instances where we hear, lengthy or substantial reports, I think the reader, if anybody's reading these, and I'm assuming we will, at least in the future, some of us, might have to go back to the full transcript to get the thumbnail version of those reports, and I was wondering if we could include that here.
Okay, good idea. Any other comments? All in favor of Commissioner McHugh's motion? Aye?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously. Next up, item 3, Administration, Executive Director Day.
Good morning, Chairman Crosby and Commissioners.
Morning. Good morning.
What I'd like to do is take a minute here in the general update just to give you an update on where we are with personnel. First of all, we have been, we think, fairly successful with our recruitments, with our financial investigators, and our goal to build a good, solid financial investigative team for our applications. We've got 2 strong candidates identified, and they're currently in the background process. As well, we are re-interviewing and moving forward with our selection of our paralegal position for legal. We've had 2 interviews and 1 candidate coming again. We look at them as very strong candidates as well, so we think our recruitment there will be successful. In addition, we are looking for some help, administrative support help for our finance, HR, IT, and reception situation. And at this point, the positions have been opened, and we've got 168 applications pending just from that opportunity. In addition, we have been recruiting for some help in IT, and the title position is Infrastructure and Application Architect. We know our IT operation is in demand, and we believe this position will be critical to Mr. Glennon as he moves forward with what we need in commission support. We've identified a strong candidate, and once again, that individual is in the background process. Just a couple of little notes, as we're also working with, particularly with Commissioner Zuniga, as we work on this year's annual report and put that in place. So hopefully we'll be able to make our goal of getting it back to the commission at the next meeting. And then at the next meeting, and really to follow up Chairman Crosby and your earlier comments, plan to go back, take a look at where we are with our regulation development and how far we've been making progress and what we still see out there as areas that the Commission needs to adopt. And then we'll also take a look at our organizational development and kind of go back over where we are in that process and take a look and see what the status of our various development of the organization is. If there's no questions, general administration-wise, I'll just make a couple comments preliminary about the item 3, the next topic, which is the policy manual. So this morning we have with us Dean Ventola from our Human Resources Office and Ed Burke, who you know is, of course, our lead consultant in our high performance project. And what we're doing is we're bringing our final draft policy manual to the Commission for your consideration. And I want to bring the Commission back briefly because this is actually the last in a series of steps that the Commission took to strengthen our policy infrastructure. You might recall beginning in April, you have previously adopted revised travel policies, P-card or purchase card, payment card policies, commuter benefit policies. Then we, of course, adopted an updated employee handbook. We initiated and accepted an independent review of travel policy to compare to other agencies and as we move forward with our policies. You also initiated and accepted, and we are currently implementing an independent review of fiscal policies and internal controls. And the Commission has previously adopted structure, format, manual, and approved new policies as we look at this full policy manual today. So as you look at it, I just wanted to, it's been a while, so just to remind you that actually this is a series of processes that we've gone through, already seen a great deal of what's in this particular policy manual. It's a 100-page plus final draft manual that today marks the step of those things we started back in, originally back in the spring. So the manual itself represents a combination of previously existing policies that were reformatted and revised slightly as needed, new policy, and incorporation. Probably the newest part to it is the incorporation of state policies that we would recommend that should be adopted for the Commission as well. If the Commission approves the manual today, I just wanted to make sure, let the Commission know that we'll continue to review the policies and under the delegated authority that you're giving me as we move forward with those policies. We'll make any corrections of typos and any other non-substantive errors that there might be as in the 130-page document. And then we'll, in the end, we're going to be training our staff, and the final step will be I'll sign the policies, but we want to make sure our staff are trained and ready to go with an understanding of those policies before we actually implement them. So now it's my pleasure to turn it over to Dean for some introductory comments on behalf of the Human Resources, and then Ed, I'm sure will follow up. Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Day. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners.
Morning.
Morning, Dean.
I'm Dean Ventola, HR Business Partner for the Gaming Commission. And as Mr. Day said, we present to you today for your approval the HR Policy Manual. As you know, shortly after I began with the Commissioner in March, in March of this year, we organized a high-performance team whose purpose was to review existing policies, create new policies, or adopt state policies to fill any gaps. It has been a collaborative effort involving the Commissioners, Human Resources, my colleague Trupti Banda, HR Manager, other members of MGC staff, and consultants from Michael and Carroll. The purpose of the manual is to provide workplace structure, ensure compliance with regulations that apply to labor and employment, lay the framework for fair and consistent treatment of MGC employees and job applicants. With that said, I will turn this over to Ed Burke of Michael and Carroll.
Morning, Commissioners. How are you?
Morning.
I'm also joined by Joan Kuhn, who has met with you many times in this process. I think Dean and Executive Director Day have really said, the main points here. I think we've got a very good manual, one that is complete and comprehensive. As was mentioned before, there will be training to supervisors and staff at MGC about some of the high points and some of the new things that will be coming forward in this manual. Pending your approval, the manual will be loaded onto the intranet, which has now been developed with CIO John Glennon and his staff within MGC. So it will be available online to everyone within the organization. We also are putting together maintenance procedures for new policies, changes to existing policies, and things of that nature. Other than that, I think that really covers it. So if you have questions, we're happy to handle them.
I had a question about the training. Is that something we'll be doing in-house, or who will be providing that training?
Yes, we'll be doing, we'll train in-house. We anticipate a combination of training with the directors themselves who are in charge of the administration, and then those policies that particularly apply, we'll train with staff.
Okay, thank you.
Any other thoughts?
Just, Ed, one of the last issues we discussed was talking about overlap between an employee's promotion and a new person being onboarded and not keeping a time frame for that training and support. And it looks like, and I just want to confirm this, on page 22 is where you kind of took out some of the pre-required dates and just created a broader general policy about overlap between an employee and their successor.
Overlap between employee and their successor, yes.
Yep.
So, I'm sorry, the question is?
I just want to, before you had a time frame in there, and I just want to make sure that if I'm reading in the right place in the policy, we took the time frame out so it's flexible enough for an employee who's getting promoted to be able to come back and support a newer employee.
And in fact, it was a tighter time frame. We talked about 30 days.
Right.
And we broadened it to, I think it's the 5th bullet on page 22. It's, you're supposed to support the onboarding and hiring, and even though you might be in your new position, you're expected to come back. So we brought that back to the high-performance team with this broadened language.
Okay.
They felt it comfortable.
Great, thank you.
The only thought I have, as I've said before, is just, you know, the danger of having something like this is the potential for not adhering to it. You know, once it's written down, you know, there's all these paperwork, things that are supposed to be signed, and now that we've got it, we have to do it. And it's not, I mean, speaking as an former administrator, it's not easy, I understand that, but I know Troop D is terrific and Dean is terrific, but it's just got to be a priority to make sure that it stays up to date and our personnel files are up to date. You know, John Glennon can probably help with this, but it's just an important, not to let this just sit on the shelf.
If I could just jump in on that point, I agree with that, and I'm delighted that the platform, a principal platform for this is going to be the intranet, because I think that is going to be, for all of us, a really important resource to access quickly and readily the kinds of things that include these policies and other operational details that will make it easier to make sure we're following.
Right. Great.
And I think that also emphasizes our kind of training plan and approach is obviously, besides keeping current, effective implementation and consistent application with the whole agency is important. So we'll focus our training with the directors first and questions around that policies and how they work. And then as we move from that training to all staff environment, then we'll focus on policies that we think are more directly applicable to staff members individually rather than as a group.
Great. Commissioner Zuniga, you want to make a motion?
Sure. I will just, prior to the motion, just mention, as somebody who was involved in this at an early stage and then look back on this recent effort, which was very comprehensive as outlined here, and I think it's a great platform, and it's great work with from both a collaboration of both consultants and internal staff. With that preamble, I would just move that this commission approve the policy manual and employee handbook as presented in the packet here today.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen, folks. All right. General Counsel Blue, acting racing director.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Careful, Mike. Yeah.
You have in your package before you this morning a very thoughtful memo from Racing Director Dernberger regarding the racing applications that we have received for the 2015 racing season. We've held all of the required hearings and received comments on those applications, and Director Dernberger has analyzed each and made some recommendations. And I think it probably makes sense for us to take them in groups and discuss them briefly. So the first recommendation is from Springfield Gaming and Redevelopment. That is our harness racing applicant. Springfield Racing and Redevelopment would be in their second year at the Plain Ridge course. They had a successful season last season. Their application is complete, and their application is very thorough. Director Dernberger recommends that we accept their application. She has a certain number of conditions in her memo. I would suggest that we accept it subject to those conditions, except for the condition regarding insurance.
Except for the condition regarding,
Regarding insurance for off-season use of the track. And the reason for my recommendation that we not include that as a condition is that this is the first season that that topic has come up. It does pertain only to off-season use of the track by folks who want to train. There are multiple ways to address that particular issue, and it runs anywhere from a waiver by the people using the track to full-out insurance held by the track owner. I think that that's a matter best left to the track and the horsemen to work out. So I would say, except for that condition, I would recommend that the commission vote to approve this application.
So is that the full point in the second bullet point? Is that
I believe, let me check right
one
here. Yes, that is that second bullet point.
on-track driver's accident insurance is the one you're talking about?
Yes, it's for off-season training use of the track.
Okay.
Penn has submitted all the other required insurance for its, regular operations and its season-type use of the track.
Okay.
I'd be interested to know if, in fact, during construction, will they be using it in the off-season this year? I know there was a question as to whether or not it would be used.
Morning, Commissioners. Morning. Steve O'Toole, General Manager of Racing at Plain Ridge Racecourse. To answer your specific question, the track will be used during the off-season. However, the construction activities in that area of the property are complete at this point. The building is all enclosed. There's no more, actually the rooftop units are on the new addition, so they won't, other than dressing up our winter circle, and we'll probably won't do that until the spring. The track won't have any activity around it in that area.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. O'Toole.
Other questions about this application?
well, there is some insurance now in place, right?
Yes,
But the limits of liability are low, right? $50,000, is that right?
That was a different application, I believe.
That's,
Oh, that's not this one.
no, I don't think, Mr.
No,
O'Toole can speak to that, but
we have an agreement with the Horsemen's Association,
Okay, all right.
and we cover full, for the season. Not only do we cover the insurance that's called out in the regs, which is based on a percentage of our purses paid. Our agreement with the Horsemen's Association is at a much higher level, and not only is it just driver's insurance is spelled out in the regs, trainer's insurance is not. So we cover training on the days when we're not racing live. So from the first day of or actually from 2 weeks before our meet to 2 weeks after our meet, there is that substantial coverage. We offer the off-season training for our horsemen as an accommodation, and we've always worked out some type of a waiver with the Horsemen's Association that they take over the responsibility at that point in time for the 3 months in the off-season when they use the track for themselves.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Commissioner Cameron?
Mr. Chair, I have had an opportunity to look at the application and certainly agree with the recommendations of both our racing director and general counsel, and I move that we approve Springfield Gaming and Redevelopment for the license pending.
Second? Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously.
Thank you, Commissioner.
All right.
Thank you.
That's 105 days next year. Yes, it is. Yeah.
Next.
Next in your package, you have 3 applications for running horse racing, or otherwise known as thoroughbred racing. You have an application from the New England Horsemen's Group to race at Suffolk Downs. You have an application from the Brockton Fair and the Middleborough Fairs to race at the track in Brockton. Each of those applications is for 1 day of racing. The applications are not complete. They are what we've referred to previously as placeholder applications. They would require that supplemental information be filed with the commission to be reviewed before further consideration by the commission.
Is there a time frame on that? When, or is it totally up to them depending on when they feel like they can get their act together?
Well, under the statute, Chapter 128A, a licensee who has an existing license then can file any time during the calendar year that their license is effective with a supplemental application, and then the commission has 30 days to review that and make a determination. So technically, these are 2015 licenses. They could file any time during 2015.
Right, okay. And is there any tie to simulcasting rights?
Yes, these applications, as they currently stand, would not be able to simulcast. They don't
Okay.
meet the required number of days.
Okay, that's right. Okay, that's
Yeah.
right. Right.
The required number of days would be 65, the minimum, correct? Because
Probably.
of the acts of
Yes.
2014.
Yes, there is some limited simulcasting that goes with a fair license, once you hit the 15 days of fair racing. But the 2 fair applications we have only asked for 1 day, and they have certain conditions with them. So whether there's racing or not at Suffolk Downs, whether there's payments into the purse fund, there's a couple of conditions in those applications.
And the simulcasting, which is now going on at Suffolk Downs, will end at the end of this year.
December
That's right.
Unless
31st.
somebody picks it up.
That's right.
Right, okay.
So the Director Dernberger's recommendation is that the commission approve all 3 of these license applications, subject to further supplemental filings and a hearing, a public hearing to review those filings, and further consideration by the commission.
Any issues, questions? Commissioner Cameron?
So the recommendation here would be simply to approve the 1-day applications without any conditions, save that a more elaborate and detailed license application be filed when the applicant is ready, and that application would trigger another hearing and then another vote by the commission. Is that basically what we're talking about?
That's basically what it is. Director Durenberger has a couple of conditions. They are things we would do anyway. So, for example, we have not done background checks on the folks involved in these applications because it is a 1-day license. We would need to do those, as we customarily do. That we would respond within 30 days of a filing of a supplemental application, which by statute we would do. That we do have a second public hearing. Our statute doesn't necessarily require a second public hearing, but I think that's a good idea, and we should take comments on the supplemental applications. And then Director Durenberger has recommended that each applicant make a good faith effort to maintain safety and accreditation. I think a good faith effort is really the key in that situation, because these are different facilities that would be run by different licensees. That, I think, would be something the commission would want to consider as part of a supplemental filing and look at in more detail.
Yeah.
But those are the conditions that she recommends.
But so we really don't have to, that's the part, that's the one that I was mostly focusing on. I should have focused on it directly. That really needs a lot of flesh on those bones, and so it seems to me it's best simply to wait for the full application and look at detail rather than a omnibus covenant to use best efforts to do something amorphous.
Yeah, I would recommend the commission look at it that way. When you have more information, it'll be easier to determine.
Right.
Because we don't know the status now. We don't know the individuals. We don't know all the information that we'll need to make good determinations and also attach conditions. We just don't have enough information to do that now.
Yeah, that's right.
Director Dernberger also said that one condition should be that the applicant's proposed minimum insurance coverage for jockeys is considered insufficient. Maybe because this really doesn't matter for all the same reasons we just got to talking about, but I don't understand exactly what that was about.
Well, in order to really determine the insurance coverage, we request copies of the certificates and, other information. We really don't have that information in these applications. So I think that is a similar situation to the accreditation. We would consider that when we got a full supplemental filing.
The thrust of this, I gather, overall, the big picture is that this goes back to what we were talking about
Absolutely,
at
right.
an earlier meeting. This is keeping the door appropriately open for a fully developed application to be submitted during the coming year, given the nature of the events that our decisions have precipitated.
And reiterating, I think,
Right.
our commitment to be as
Right.
flexible as we possibly can within the
Right.
limits of the law and common sense
Right.
to try to facilitate folks who can get together a running horse opportunity in Massachusetts.
Right.
Any other comments,
No,
Commissioner?
I would just like to say that I did have the opportunity, since we certainly have had many opportunities to be out at Suffolk Downs and Plain Ridge. I did go out to the Brockton Fairgrounds because there has not been racing in a number of years, and found the facility to be in very good shape. All the buildings, the barns, as well as the racetrack were in, frankly, better shape than I had anticipated. So I think that speaks to the fact that it would be viable if, in fact, this becomes a full application.
The facility would be viable.
The facility would be, yes.
Anything else?
I was also thinking about the outer date here as to what would be the last day by which an amended application might come. And I guess it's also, there's plenty of time because it all depends on the number of days and the weather conditions, whether they would, as well as the 30 days that we have to act on it here. So I think there's also plenty of time for us to wait for an amended application if we act today, which we need to do anyway.
There's enough time with 30 days?
Oh, yeah, plenty.
Well, I actually had a question about that, the 30 days not being enough time.
Oh, no, I'm thinking about acting on a future amended application.
Agreed. Yeah, and I actually thought, since we have such limited information and we need to fully vet this and do backgrounds on all the key individuals, that 30 days is a very short period of time to do that
Where
work.
is the reference to 30 days? What page are you looking at?
It's in,
The recommendation for, I'm looking at one here on page, well.
Oh, I see, yeah. Okay, the
Yeah.
commission has 30 days. Right.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there would be staffing requirements
Well, that's a good
included.
point, because we don't want to set an expectation in an applicant's mind that we can, in fact, that we only will need 30 days, because that could have, so maybe, I think your instinct, maybe we should change that language to say sufficient time.
That's a
It's
statutory
a statutory
language.
requirement,
Oh, it is?
unfortunately, yes. It's 128A,
Right.
Section 2.
So I guess the best we can do it is encourage them to have a completed
Give us more
applicant,
time.
application well in advance of 30 days, knowing the kind of work that would be needed. I guess that's
Yes.
the best we'll be able to do is encourage that.
And we are also available to discuss it with them prior to their filing,
Right.
too, if we can help in any way to answer questions or perhaps, get
And
more
by-
information.
We could certainly get for example, we don't need to get down the weeds now, but I'm about to, We could certainly ask for a draft application, for example, before the formal filing. So,
And qualifiers.
qualifiers and everything, so that it wouldn't trigger the 30 days, but
Right. Anything else? Do you want this in one? Are you suggesting this be one vote for the three, or are we taking three separate ones?
I would do it one at a time.
Yeah,
I
okay.
think that makes sense.
Commissioner Cameron?
Yep, so I move that we approve the one-day racing license application to the New England Horsemen's Benevolent and Protective Association.
Second?
second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously.
Make a second motion that we approve the one-day license to the Brockton Agricultural Society.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously.
Additionally, I move that we approve the Middleborough Agricultural Society one-day license.
Second?
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have that unanimously as well. Thank you. Good
Thank
job.
you.
We now get to Catherine, General Counsel Blue again. And are you going to do the assessment? Who else is coming up?
Derek
We're going to
will-
do the assessment first.
CFAO Lennon will come and
Right,
join
okay.
us.
I'm just going to make item 5C first, and then we'll get to the two awards.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
So this will be a really quick topic, just here to do clarification. Both the MGM and WIN licensing conditions contain requirements, the payment of assessments under 205 CMR 121, which is our annual assessment.
These are the assessments for the operating costs of the commission.
Yeah, so it's the difference between our costs and our anticipated revenues for the year. We assess back on the industry in a pro rata share, based on their percentage of gaming positions. And those conditions require a certain number of days from the effective date of the license for the balance of those assessments to be paid. 5 business days for MGM and 3 business days for Win Mass, and that's condition number 5 in the MGM license, and under section 2, condition number 5 in the Win Mass license. So that's where it can be found. Under 205 CMR 121.03B, the commission is allowed to actually bill multiple phases of that assessment. So what I'm here to do is to clarify and, I guess, seek guidance on whether you want to amend the license conditions or just allow the clarification to be made that our assessment of $20.8 million, which we made in June, I'm not ready to send out a bill to the rest of our, to our 3 licensees, Win, MGM, and Penn. There are a few large items that we still haven't made decisions on. Central monitoring system, which was in our budget for about $1.75 million. The cohort study, which you'll hear later today about, which was in our budget for about $975,000. And then final staffing patterns, which we're still working out for the Penn facility. We haven't made final decisions on. I'm hoping, we will have final decisions on those by my mid-year recommendation to you, an update, which will be in either the first meeting in January or the second meeting in January. So what I'd like to do is hold off on sending out those second bills. We have enough money in the bank right now. I checked it today. We have $26 million unspent, $21 million uncommitted when you back out our current contractual obligations, which will more than get us through that time period. So I was looking for what the commission would like to do. I would recommend just as clarification, but if you want to make it very clear, we could vote to amend those conditions and state that the assessments under those 2 pieces would be due 5 or 3 days from the date I send the bill out to them. versus 5 to 3
The
days at
date
the
you
effective
send it,
date.
or the date,
I send the bill out.
do you send it electronically?
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
we send it through email.
And the alternative is just to do nothing and you send the bill when you. are ready
Correct,
to
and
send
one,
the
and
bill.
they're covered under our regulations. It's just
Right.
how clean do you want it to be? Do you want the license
Right.
conditions that are up on our website to reflect it? Or do you want it to be a cross-reference to our regulations, which we're still within?
Right.
I don't,
Okay.
go ahead, please.
Well, I would prefer to leave the conditions alone. I sort of like reopening the statute. And send the bill when you're ready to send the bill,
Okay.
with the understanding that I'm sure we won't get any pushback that
They're not fighting to pay now, are they?
they're not, right.
No, and I'd prefer not to have them pay now, because if I were to have them pay now, I'd have to assess at the $20.8 million
Right.
amount, and there's a
Right.
$3 million to $4 million swing in there
Right,
that
right,
we'd be
right.
sitting on them.
Substantively, it makes perfectly good sense, and I can't conceive of any opposition on the part of any of the licensees to that, or any reluctance on the licensees simply to pay within the 3 to 5 or 5 day period after the assessment is made, so.
The only thought I have is that, you know, we know that there are lots of people out there ready to sue us about most anything. And I don't have an opinion as to what does this, but we just don't want to inadvertently give somebody some kind of a technical failure on our part. So if that's covered by whatever actions you propose, that's fine with me.
The condition in the WIN and the MGM agreements is very specific in terms of a number of days after the effective date. And the effective date, once you award the license, will be tomorrow. So I think it would be good for the commission not to change the condition, but to vote to say that you're going to amend the condition slightly to say that it's due 3 to 5 days after CFAO Lennon sends the invoice. And that way it will be clear. Right now, it has a very specific time frame for payment, which would be next week.
Okay.
So it's a verbal amendment?
Well, what you're doing technically is waiving a payment date that would come up next week and postponing it for a later time.
Okay.
And it would just clarify that.
Well, can we just waive a clause in the agreement, period? That we don't have to amend the agreement and rewrite it and get everybody to sign it again? We can just waive it? Is that the appropriate way to do it?
You're just changing the payment dates. You're not waiving the entire clause. It is still due. It is just due at a different time. So I think you can do that by a vote here that acknowledges that, we aren't prepared to ask for the payment. We're not in a
Right.
position to invoice it.
Right. I mean, this makes all the sense in the world. The only issue is, is there any remote possibility of claiming a technical default on the part of our licensees if we don't handle this a certain way? That's my only concern. And I defer to other people's judgments. Mr. Nozel, if you have an opinion, please.
Thank you, Chairman. We've worked with General Counsel Blue over the last several weeks to talk about this, and certainly I think what we'd look for is some level of certainty from the Commission through an action to provide the direction on when that payment should be made. I think that can be done certainly by a vote of the Commission reflected in the record here. And obviously your enforcement ability to, I guess, rectify a default lies with you under the statute as well. So I think that would have to come back to you in the first instance as well.
Right. Right. Okay. I'm fine.
Yep.
Look, I defer to probably Commissioner McHugh to structure this motion, maybe with the advice of Counsel Blue.
So I'll take that advice.
I would propose a motion that waives the 3 or 5 day payment date in the license agreements as currently drafted and modifies that to allow payment by the licensee within 3 to 5 days of receipt of an invoice from us.
3 or 5 days, depending
Depending on
upon
the
what
agreement.
date is in your agreement.
Yes.
Does that make sense to you?
We would have no objection to that.
Okay.
On behalf of MGM Resorts and Blue Tarp Redevelopment.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Any other thoughts? All in favor of the waiver as proposed?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jed. All right, we're now on items A and B. If the teams from MGM and Wynn want to both come forth and pick one side or the other.
Come on.
Welcome. We do have item 5A is the award of the Region B license. And we do have an obligation under the tentative license award, conditional license award that we made to have a vote, a formal vote that executes and awards that license if the referendum ballot initiative was unsuccessful, which it was. So we are now proposing to have that vote to make the formal award to MGM. I believe Commissioner McHugh has that motion.
I do, Mr. Chairman, and given the condition precedent has been fulfilled, I move that the commission formally award the Category 1 gaming license for Region B, as that region is defined in General Laws, Chapter 23K, Section 19A2, to Blue Tarp Redevelopment LLC. Said license to be effective on November 7, 2014, and to be subject, 1, to all terms and conditions contained in the agreement between the Commission and Blue Tarp Redevelopment LLC dated June 13, 2014, and 2, to acceptance by Blue Tarp Redevelopment LLC of the license and those conditions.
Second.
Second.
Any further discussion? Anybody change their mind?
Well, I think it's a pretty good idea.
I think we'll go with it. All in favor of the motion to formally award the license finally to MGM Springfield signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it unanimously. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I take it, Mr. Mathis, before you say anything, that you do accept the license and those conditions.
I thought I was going to get away with a technicality on that, Judge. On behalf of Blue Tarp Redevelopment LLC and MGM Springfield and MGM Resorts, we happily accept the license. Thank you very much.
Great.
Thank you.
And we've said this before, and, we'll stop breaking our arms, patting ourselves on the back, but even the debate about the referendum, whether or not to go forward, even in that debate, there were comments about the remarkably innovative approach and the aspirations for Springfield that this seems to promise. And I would just say again to all of you, more power to you. It's really off to a great start, and we're excited about making this come to fruition. Thank you.
Thank you. If I can, I'd just like to say a few words. First of all, I want to extend our greetings from our chairman, Jim Murrin and Bill Hornbuckle. They appreciate the effort and the professionalism that the commission has extended to us throughout this process. I was moved by your comment this morning, Mr. Chairman, about as excited as we are about the 60% that turned out in support of this vote, we're laser focused on the 40% that we want to convert, and we want to show that this is a powerful economic tool, and that we will bring towns like Springfield, Everett, and Plainville back to economic strength. So thank you very much, and look forward to working with you over the next 3 years to get this open.
Anyway.
I thought it was more like 15 years, Mr.
Yeah. I'm focused on the construction site.
Yes.
The other thing I'd like to report is, as of yesterday morning, Seaboard Drilling, a local Chicopee company, started doing bore testings on our site. I think there are 3 contractors on the site, so that is the first 3 of our 2,000 construction workers.
Great.
And the first few dollars of our $800 million spend. So we're making good on our promise as of Wednesday morning.
Great.
Thank you.
Terrific.
Glad to hear it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item is item 5B. This is the representational formal vote on the Region A license. Since that was a discussion from which I recused myself, I will recuse myself from this vote as well and ask Commissioner McHugh to carry forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As with the MGM Blue Tarp license, the terms and conditions of the agreement that we signed on November 7th, signed earlier, on September 17th, I should say, require a vote today formally from the commission to award the license. And so I look for a motion. Commissioner Stebbins, do you have a motion in that regard?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I move that the commission formally award the Category 1 gaming license for Region A, as that region is defined in General Laws, Chapter 23K, Section 19A1, to WinMass LLC, said license to be effective November 7th, 2014, and to be subject, one, to all terms and conditions contained in the agreement between the Commission and WinMass LLC dated September 17th, 2014, and two, to acceptance by WinMass LLC of the license in those conditions.
Is there a second for that?
Second.
Is there any discussion? All right, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 The ayes have it unanimously. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And as I said to Mr. Mathis, I take it that you accept the license under those terms and conditions, Mr. DeSalvio?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we absolutely accept, and on behalf of Steve Wynn, the Board of Directors, and the entire Wynn team, we just want to say thank you so much for placing your trust and confidence in us. We look forward to developing an amazing facility in Everett, and can't wait to get started. And I actually, I wanted to talk a little bit about a reciprocation for something that happened in September. You were very kind to present us with a large-size replica of our license designation, and I'd like to return the favor today.
All right.
Thank you, Jenny. And we were so excited to get started that we wired the $85 million this morning, and it should be somewhere in the commission's account, and we want to get underway just as soon as possible. So I'd like to make this presentation on behalf of Wynn Resorts of our acceptance and our payment of the $85 million, and look forward to the next 15 years. And I think truly you'll be very proud of this resort when it opens.
Well, thank you very much. That's a very quick yield on the investment.
$85 million. Congrats.
Thank you, Mr. DeSalvio. I think it's important for everybody to understand, and then we'll end this, that those funds, those $85 million in funds, to be followed by an equal amount soon from MGM, begin the yield to the various funds that the legislature set up and the governor approved when this legislation was passed. Yield to the tourism fund that enhances tourism in Massachusetts, the community mitigation fund to deal with unexpected issues that may arise from the casino's erection and operation, the local aid fund, which is the same fund that the lottery money goes into, that provides unrestricted funds to cities and towns, the rainy day fund, an enhancement of the amount that's in that fund, the education fund for higher education and K through 12 education, on which there's so much of an emphasis these days, the transportation infrastructure and development fund that deals with construction for local roads and highways, the public health trust fund that we're going to discuss later today, and other funds as well. So this is the beginning of the payoff, the yield, the return on investment that the Commonwealth and the legislature anticipated when this was the legislation was passed, and we're delighted to be able to bring that here today.
Great. Thank you very
Well
much
said.
all.
Thank you.
We like $85 million. We will take
Ours is on the way.
Okay. The check is in the mail, right? We will take a brief adjournment for a press opportunity and come back together in half an hour or so. We are ready to reconvene the 138th meeting, and we are going to go to item 6, which we'll try to conclude before lunch, and then we'll take a lunch break. Ombudsman Ziemba.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today, I'll discuss, for the first item, I want to talk about the Community Mitigation Fund and associated mitigation committees established in the Expanded Gaming Act. So today, I'll discuss a proposed plan to prepare for an upcoming February 1st application deadline for applications to the Community Mitigation Fund. This is the fund that was created to assist parties in offsetting any impacts related to the operations or construction of gaming facilities. Pursuant to MGL Chapter 23K, Section 61, parties requesting funds from the Community Mitigation Fund shall do so by February 1st of each year. This upcoming February will be the first since deposits are put in the fund. As a result of the licensing fees licensing fee was paid by Penn National earlier this year, and the licensing fees to be paid by MGM, and I guess the licensing fee that was just paid by Wynn, there will be dollars in this fund for the first time before the application date. These will be the last funds that will, the last payments that will be put into the fund until 2017 projected, when MGM and Wynn are expected to be operational. Thereafter, 6.5% of the taxes, the gaming taxes paid by MGM and Wynn will be paid into the fund, but this allocation based on the licensing fees is the only payment until the actual operation of the gaming facilities. I'm focusing primarily on just Wynn and MGM, and I'm not referencing the Region C application because those are still pending, so all of the figures that I'm going to give you relate to those two facilities. We conservatively estimate that approximately $18 million will be placed into the fund annually, not counting the deposits from any Region C gaming facility, to deal with impacts that may result from gaming facilities. This is on top of the $17.5 million that we will have in the fund as a result of the licensing fees. The memo in your packet, it describes how, consistent with our statute, our regulations, and past decisions of the Commission, the Community Mitigation Fund will be available to both Category 1 and Category 2 communities. Further, communities that were not designated surrounding communities during the application process can still apply to the fund based on our regulations and our past practices. So the fund is generally available to help communities and other entities deal with these impacts, and the Commission has demonstrated a significant amount of flexibility in making sure that we try to address those impacts despite any sort of other nuances that happen during the application process. The memo before you further describes the role of advisory committees established in the Expanded Gaming Act and their role in advising the Commission on the use of community mitigation funds. The Act establishes the Gaming Policy Advisory Committee, the Community Mitigation Subcommittee, and local community mitigation advisory committees. They each play a role in advising the Commission regarding the use of community mitigation fund. It's clear in the statute that the Commission shall decide on all applications for funding, but the committees do play an important role in advising the Commission on how funds should be utilized. The February 1st date poses some logistical difficulties due to how late in the year we are awarding the Category 1 licenses. First, the funds are meant to be used to mitigate operations or construction impacts. No facilities will be operational by February 1st, thereby taking away half of what the fund should be made available for. And further, by February 1st, it is not likely that we will have any much significant construction activity for either the MGM facility or the Wynn facility. Perhaps they might begin some initial construction remediation or some demolition, but it is not likely that we'll be experiencing a very significant construction activity by February 1. Therefore, it's conceivable that the upcoming initial funding round
may not feature many significant applications or perhaps any applications, because it's anticipated that the fund will just be made available to address actual occurring impacts. This perhaps could be useful because, as I said, the initial $17.5 million that has been allocated so far to date to the fund does have to last. It has to last until these facilities are operational and we're generating gaming tax revenues, which then lead to further deposits in the fund. The second logistical issue is that it may be extremely difficult to establish some of the committees and get significant impact and advice prior to when we should notify communities about the fund. With the February 1st application date, we probably should notify communities about the details of the fund probably by the end of December or the very beginning of January, in order to allow communities to evaluate whether or not they want to apply, whether or not they actually have impacts to meet the February 1st date. To deal with these difficulties, I recommend that we develop an initial community mitigation policy by December 18th. We could seek the advice of the Gaming Policy Advisory Committee, the GPAC, on this initial policy, but probably we would not be able to seek the advice of the other committees that have yet to be established. We're aiming to have a meeting of the GPAC by early December. During and after the upcoming review of Community Mitigation Fund applications, if any, we can consult with all of those committees. With this input, we can enhance the policies regarding the Community Mitigation Fund and develop recommendations regarding operational concerns, how operational concerns may be mitigated. The Act, as I stated, they put in the two different classifications of types of impacts. During the course of the next year, we could seek the advice of all those committees about how we should go about addressing any of those operational impacts, in addition to further refinement of any of the details on construction-related items that may go into this first funding round. So I look forward to a much more robust conversation regarding the initial policy by December 18th, which would allow us to get a policy in place with enough time to notify communities of what would be available in that first funding round. However, within the context that we'll have that much more robust discussion, I wanted to just provide some initial recommendations that we should likely consider during that December 18th meeting. And if you can turn to page, sorry for the lengthy memo.
That's very helpful.
Turn to page 5. So some of the first recommendations that we should likely consider during that meeting on the 18th would be that the first funding round should likely be for construction only, as no facility will be operational by February 1st. Applicant communities would need to address how the specific mitigation requested will address such impacts and provide justification of any funds requested. Unlike the existing surrounding community agreements, which were based on anticipated impacts, any community mitigation award would be based on impacts that have occurred or are occurring. Applicant comments would describe if and how such impacts were addressed in any host and surrounding community agreements. We would review those agreements to see how they relate to any of the requests for funding. And similar to our surrounding community review process, the Commission would ask each licensee to review and comment on any requests for funding. The Commission would evaluate such requests in a similar manner to how it reviewed the surrounding community petitions during the application process. The Commission would evaluate the submittal by the community, any input received from the community and interested parties such as regional planning agencies, the responses of the licensee, and Commission consultant reviews. And I believe that we would likely, in the recommendations for December, we would specify that a range of activities that could be funded under the Community Mitigation Fund, but I don't believe that we should, similar to the way that we did it during the reviews of surrounding community petitions, prescribe with finite detail what specific impacts could or should be funded, that we could evaluate them once they're submitted. So in summary, what I'm recommending is that the commission direct staff to work on a policy related to the Community Mitigation Fund, to do outreach to the Gaming Policy Advisory Committee, if we can get that established in time for the December 18th meeting.
Questions, thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree. This is very helpful you laid it out in a way that really explains where we are, where we should be going, and your recommendations are sound.
Good. Thank you.
And I think I agree with all of that. But in trying to be helpful in thinking about the overall big picture within which the regulations are to be created, is it fair to say that the Community Mitigation Fund is really a fund designed to deal with unanticipated consequences of construction or operation, rather than supplement things that already are accounted for and dealt with elsewhere?
No, I think that's exactly right. Throughout our deliberations on surrounding community agreements, we put a lot of attention on making sure the communities knew that we are hoping that impacts would be addressed in their surrounding community agreements, in their host community agreements. Obviously, in comparison to host communities, surrounding communities had perhaps less bargaining power than host communities in their agreements. So we will carefully evaluate what was included in those surrounding community agreements when we evaluate the requests for funding. But that's exactly right. Unanticipated or needs that were not met through the surrounding community agreements and host community agreements.
And it's also true, is it not, that we, in some cases, mentioned during the course of our deliberations that these funds, if they would be available to communities who were neither host nor surrounding communities, if they otherwise met the criteria that we've just described, i.e. suffered unanticipated consequences.
That's exactly right. So we are not constrained by a definition of whether or not a community was a designated surrounding community during the application process. We stressed throughout that if there are mitigation needs, that we can address them through this fund. That's exactly right.
I had a similar thought and thought of it in accounting terms. I think we should have, as you develop the policy and think about the recommendations, I think there ought to be a predisposition of these funds being first in, last out. I'm flipping an accounting term of last in, first out, I guess. But because of that nature of unanticipated and essentially in the context of a lot of discussion that has already occurred in terms of host and surrounding community mitigation monies, we should resist the temptation to go quickly, in my opinion, because of this notion of unanticipated, that I do agree that it should be at least primarily reserved for unanticipated impacts. Now, there's big policy questions, I think, that I look forward to the input of other advisory groups like the statutory subcommittees, etc., as to whether, for example, the monies from one region should stay within that region, because that would be commensurate to the size, right? If you believe that impacts are commensurate to the amount of people that come to the facility, then that would call for making those monies stay within that region. I could easily argue the other way around, that because we are in the unanticipated notion here, those funds should be thought at a state level.
I think we actually do benefit by when these licenses are being issued because of the likely fact that our first funding round perhaps will not have a number of applications that will make the fund oversubscribed. We will have some significant dollars going into future rounds. so that we can get into a number of the very significant policy debates on how this fund should be utilized for the next 15 years into next year, after we've been able to properly form those local subcommittees and then the community mitigation subcommittee, and as we try to determine, how best we need the needs statewide, but also regionally. And one of the other complicating features is that the Category 2 facilities in those communities, they can take advantage of the Community Mitigation Fund, but the way that the act was structured was that the only outlays from those facilities to this fund came just from the licensing fee.
Yes.
All of their, the gaming tax revenues, they do not go into this fund. So how we account for those impacts out of the general fund would also have to be determined in an allocation policy.
Right.
Other questions? Just one thing for future reference. Do you have any, can you see why the communities around the Category 2 were not represented on the subcommittee or on the local committees?
No, I think I tried to look at the statutory history of that, and I don't believe I saw anything.
A reason?
Maybe it's related to that very point you just made, which is there's no ongoing money that flows to them.
Yeah.
But they didn't limit them.
Flows from the Category
Right.
2.
But they didn't limit, there's nothing that says we can't
Absolutely.
give it to those communities. So
Yes.
I think we should just think about whether we want to invite those people into a non-statutory committee anyway. It doesn't, in an advisory role, it seems kind of unfair to not have them have similar representation, but we can cross that bridge
Yeah.
a little later, but something to think about.
I'm sorry.
I think part of the legislature's intent might have been the recognition that Category 1 facilities are likely to have more impacts than Category 2 facilities. And so when they're looking at all of the impacts, the legislature might have been thinking about how to tackle those, the Category 1 impacts. But that said, we understand that there may or there can be Category 2 impacts as well.
Plus, there's no date by which we need to act after February on any one of these requests. So there could, February notwithstanding, this next February, we could really take whatever time is necessary to make those decisions.
That's right. And
You've
so
got
we
a
put...
5-month schedule on this.
So we put a draft
It could be
schedule
2
in
years.
your packets on how we're going to review those applications, and after we get those applications, we'll be able to go back to the communities, get further detail. Potentially, we could have further advice from those committees. Hopefully, they'll be formed by then, but there is no date by which we have to act. We include some potential dates here in the packet.
John, what is the status of the governor's other appointments? We know there's a chair that's in the background check process. What about the other, 8, I guess?
Well, we've had some discussions with them. I think up next would be the licensees, now that we have them, and how we can get them through the process. Obviously, each one of them, the designees have been through extensive background checks through ours, and that is usually the most time-consuming part of the appointment process.
Right.
So, in conversations with the governor's office, they have expressed that they would take a look at these and try to expedite them as quickly as we can.
Because you're talking about trying to have a meeting in early December, right?
That's exactly right.
And at the moment, none of those people are appointed?
Correct. But we will, with just the new chair, we would have a quorum. And I'm hoping that given the extensive background checks that we've had with our licensees, that at least those members
Could
would
come
be
on
there.
board.
So if one person is sick that day, we could still have the meeting.
Right. Okay. And so they've renewed the House and Senate appointments?
Yeah, so we have the current appointees, and
Pardon?
the current appointees from our last meeting, they remain
Through the rest of this year?
through the rest of this year.
Okay. And then just on again, for future reference, on the flow chart, figuring out where the various communities are going to exercise their responsibility. I had always kind of imagined that the applications would go first to the lowest level advisory committee and work their way up, but I'm not sure how that'll work. But we ought to add that onto the Gantt chart process here at some point.
Yeah, I think there's an open question on how those committees want to work. I mean, those committees are not creatures of the commission. on how they would like to provide advice to us, either on a more general basis regarding mitigation or on specific applications. Where neighbors are sitting next to neighbor communities, would they want to get into the questions regarding specific applications or provide more general advice? I think there'll be some consultations on that type of a matter.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. So we've got a lot of things to talk about
Yeah.
coming up.
A lot of work ahead.
Right. Any other thoughts, questions?
I just had with the chart, John, I think you have region C and A reversed at the very top of the chart.
Their opening dates.
Okay, we'll get that addressed.
Yeah.
I think I need my reading glasses.
Oh, yeah.
I don't have them
You can
yet, but
borrow
it
mine.
looks like I need some.
Just turn the chart upside down.
Okay.
I don't think they need to vote on the recommendation, but, my recommendation is that you direct staff to move forward and develop a policy that we can bring to you no later than December 18th, after consultation with appropriate parties such as the Gaming Policy Advisory Committee and others, such as the Mass Municipal Association.
And I don't think we need a vote on that, right?
No.
Yeah, I think we're just, yeah, great. All right, item 6B.
Director Wells is going to join me for the discussion on the Regency update.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Commissioners, today, IEB Director Wells and I will give you an update on the Regency application process. We'll provide a background of how we arrived here at this point in the application process and describe what decisions the Commission has made to foster competition in the region. Director Wells will explain what is required for our December 1st RFA1 application date, what the IEB review process will be, and she will provide some detail about how and when scoping sessions will occur. I will then describe some other key dates, what we've been hearing in the region in a more general sense, and recommendations for next steps. So if you turn to the PowerPoint on the page 1. Commissioners, I understand that you know the history of how we arrived here, but for those in the viewing public, on April 18th, 2013, the Commission voted unanimously in a 5-0 vote to adopt a plan that opened Regency or Southeastern Mass to commercial applications. As noted in a April 18th, 2013 blog by Chairman Crosby, the Commission voted to pursue this option to protect the best interests of Southeastern Mass by developing an alternative that assures timely economic development and job creation, whether or not the tribe successfully meets its promised deadlines. Under this plan, the Commission will open Region C to commercial applications. The final determination to issue a commercial license will take into account the totality of the economic circumstances, including tribal status, as they exist at the time of the licensing decision. In many regards, the decision that we will make upon review of all of the applications, assuming that we get them, is similar to the types of reviews that we have done for both for Region A and Region B licensees, as in we take a look at the total circumstances at the time, including the economics, the jobs, the revenues, and the like. The Regency application process, consistent with that determination in 2013 to open Region C to commercial developers, the Commission established the application deadlines for Region C, including the RFA1, which is the background investigation application, and RFA2, the full site-specific application deadlines. The initial RFA1 application deadline was set at September 30th, 2013. The initial RFA2 application deadline was July 23rd of this year. In order to promote competition on April 3rd, 2014, given the state of the applications as we then saw them, this July RFA2 deadline was extended until at least September 23rd, 2014. We met again on the 26th of this year, and the commission discussed a looming July 14th, 2014 deadline for the execution of host community agreements. And at that time, there were no host community agreements that had yet been executed in Region C. And so given that fact, the commission again extended the Region C RFA2 application deadlines. The commission extended the deadline to December 1st, 2014 for the RFA1 application. That is the current deadline that we have to be substantially complete, and extended the RFA2 deadline to March 27, 2015. Over the course of that time, the commission also took other actions to promote competition in Region C. On April 17, 2014, the commission voted to change the calculation of the minimum capital investment for Region C by including the cost of infrastructure outside of the property boundaries. Later this year, the commission decided to open Region C to new applicants. Previously, it had been only to those applicants that had applied to Region C by September 30th of the previous year, and to Region A, B, and Category 2 applicants. And then finally, on June 26th, the commission also decided to amend the commission's regulations to allow for the inclusion of capitalized interest in the calculation of minimum capital investment for Region C. I'm going to turn to Director Wells. Oh, so what we have here is this is just a summary of some of the applicable statutory, regulatory, and commission guidance on the rules that apply to the Region C process, and specifically the first section, 205 CMR 12203 and 11 and 12, if people are looking for the specific site regarding minimum capital investment. That is the site for our regulatory changes. I believe we just enacted them very recently. I'm going to now turn to Director Wells, who's going to take you through the remaining guidance applicable to the IUB and some of her processes.
Thank you, John. The first regulation I want to bring to your attention is under 205 CMR 11502, subject 1 and 2. Initially, the IEB will either determine that an RFA1 application is sufficiently complete for the purposes of initiating substantive review, or will request additional information. That's that first threshold. If we get an application, it isn't even sufficiently complete to even begin an investigation, we'll go back and request that be completed. That's the first step. And in addition to that, on June 26 of 2014, the Commission adopted a motion that in order for our Regency RFA1 application to be substantially complete, which is a different term than sufficiently complete, it must include qualifiers, operation, and financing. So once the applicant meets that initial threshold of being sufficiently complete, that we'll even take a look at it, we're then looking for it to be substantially complete so that we can really do an in-depth investigation. In regard to that motion that was adopted by the Commission under MGL 223K12A, it specifies the Commission in reviewing suitability shall consider the business ability of the applicant to establish and maintain a successful gaming establishment. That applies to that, who their qualifiers are, and specifically their operations. How are they going to operate this gaming establishment, whether they bring in an outside operator or they have that business ability themselves. We're going to be looking at that, and that's what we're looking for in addition to the financing, to see if it's substantially complete. On the next slide, we have that December 1st is the deadline for the submission of an RFA1 for Region C. Applicants that have not previously filed an application must file that RFA1 form and provide the $400,000 application fee. So we'll see if we get any additional interest by December 1st. Applicants that have previously filed an application, we don't need them to refile an entire RFA1 application. The IEB already has that information, and we don't want to create redundancy in that process. All we're asking for is a cover letter referencing that prior RFA1. So if an applicant X can report out that they are interested in Region C, please see our RFA1 application that was submitted on such and such a date. And they do not have to pay the additional $400,000 application fee. the RFA ones, when they're submitted pursuant to this deadline, they're expected to be substantially complete at that time, and we're going to take a look at that pursuant to the Commission's directive from June 26, make sure that they adequately describe the proposed financing, operation, and qualifiers at that time. We'll evaluate those applications, the scoping process, which I'll go into in a little more detail shortly, that will help determine the completeness of those applications. We are expected to have a quick turnaround time for these investigations, and therefore I may report back to the Commission if I get an application that doesn't meet the requirements that the Commission set out to be substantially complete. I would be reporting back to the Commission that it is not substantially complete, and I would expect that the Commission may take some action on that application at that time. So I just want to make sure the applicants are aware that that is a possibility, a significant possibility, if they are not deemed substantially complete when they submit their RFA 1 by the deadline of December 1st. The next slide has to do with the scoping process.
Before we go there.
Oh, yeah.
Remind me, I think I know the answer to this question, but remind me, applicants that have submitted an application prior to the deadlines because they were looking at one region or another, they have to remain the applicant, correct?
Correct.
If there's a qualifier or qualifiers within that applicant that might be interested in submitting, they would have to remain an applicant.
Correct. So they have that opportunity now because the Commission opened it up for new applications. But a potential qualifier, if they want to do it under a different name, under a different group, but they were a qualifier, they could do that, but they have to submit the RFA 1 and the application fee.
Great.
Yeah, to follow up on that, Director, so if it is a different, they were previously an applicant in another region.
Correct. Yeah.
But they may change part of, some of the qualifiers may be different, or
That's okay. So they can do that. That's part of this initial review that the IEB will be doing. It is not unusual for qualifiers to come in and out. So if a prior applicant comes before the Commission, submits the letter, we were interested in Region C, CRRFA 1, if there are some minor differences, that's part of that evaluation that the IEB will do, and we will report out to the Commission for the Commission's consideration on what to do with that. But that shouldn't be a non-starter.
right. So in addition to a cover letter, you would want whatever changes.
Correct. And we can, exactly, and that, that's actually a good segue, unless there are commissioners that have any other questions, into the scoping process. I would strongly encourage the applicants to be in contact with me as soon as possible if they are interested, in Region C. In order to meet the requirements of the Commission's Region C application process, the applicants must schedule a formal scoping session with the IEB. The scoping is the evaluation of their application to see who would be deemed qualifiers, whether they're entities or individuals, so we have a complete picture of the investigation that needs to be done. This required scoping session can occur before or after December 1st, but it must be scheduled at least 2 weeks prior to December 1st. That's already been they've been notified, so that's coming up.
I talked about this with Ombudsman Ziemba, but how can you have the scoping meeting after the application is due?
Ideally, we want it beforehand. That's the policy. There was an encouragement for a little flexibility here. So my preference, if there is an applicant for Region C, prior to December 1st, put your deal together, come in, have a scoping session. I can tell you who all the qualifiers are, and submit the application. If for whatever reason, there is a problem there, I can be a little flexible, but the preference is to do it at the beginning. It is a far more efficient process, and it's the better way to go.
But you could, the scoping session is designed to figure out who has to be a qualifier.
Correct.
And so you could get an application in which you've got an operator and the money person and the like, but they don't list some people who you think should be qualifiers, and that has happened before, and the application's been in, and you could fix it. So.
Correct.
But as a practical matter, is this suggesting that the substantially complete criteria is a little soft? In other words, if you haven't even had your scoping meeting, then presumably you could file, you actually are substantially incomplete, but you find out at the scoping meeting, and then you've got some time after the scoping meeting to get substantially complete.
Can I take a stab at that? I think, so what we're really saying here is your qualifiers, your operations, and your finances, which is different. So those three major categories are substantially complete. There'll always be some negotiation on a qualifier or, so I think what this does is allow a couple of extra weeks for those folks who are really looking to put a deal together in a short period of time. This ability to scope after the fact just gives an extra couple of weeks here.
But if it's, I understand what the issue is, and I think, we should put it on the table here that we're talking about, do we want to create flexibility in the schedule? That's the issue. And you're suggesting, in effect, a way to do it. But and maybe it's a good way to do it, but it seems to me that what that does is your sort of details, your last handful of qualifiers, you might not have in, and you could get them in a little late. But that isn't really the hang-up. The hang-up is getting an operator.
Correct.
Getting your fundamental money. If we're needing to create some wiggle room here, I'm not sure this really does it, if they still have to be substantially complete by December 1.
But substantially complete are the three major categories.
Well,
It's
that's
not-
what I'm saying.
It's, for example, if you don't have an operator at all, and there are no qualifiers around an operator, then that's not substantially complete. But if in the scoping meeting you find out, well, really, these two additional people will have to be qualifiers, they've already been substantially complete, they have the three major categories, that's just the detail work after the fact. Am I?
Well, I think part of the intent was that if they're going to file an application fee on December 1st, we are providing the additional flexibility within our existing rules so that they can make sure that all of their pieces are into the IEB. There's that couple-week period that basically we're providing. It is up to the IEB to make the final determination of whether or not they are substantially complete. So what we're anticipating is that no later than December 17th, according to the recommendation from the IEB, that scoping meeting would occur. So what you could have is a situation where prior to that last scoping meeting, we still have the requirement that you have to provide all the information that is necessary at least 1 week prior to that scoping meeting. So in effect, we have a December 17th cutoff date where all of your detailed information has to be into the IEB, outlining all of those three things, the three legs of the stool that we just outlined. They have to be into the IEB by the 10th. The scoping meeting is on the 17th. And then the IEB comes back to the commission and makes a recommendation saying, we've had the scoping meetings, we think that they still might be, there may not be completeness of their application. Here's what we recommend. We recommend that we look no further at the application, or you could say we give them 2 more days. It would be up to the recommendation of the IEB at the December 18th commission meeting, likely, to weigh in on what that proposal. So yes, it's trying to live within our existing rules, but to provide a little bit more flexibility, given the status of Regency that we see at the current date.
Yeah, and my question is, and I don't have an answer to this at the moment, I think I want to hear the rest of the conversation, but does that really do the job? If we want to create some more room for people, then maybe we ought to just do it one way or another, rather this, sort of tortured slight help, but not really doing a lot.
And I would suggest that that's a policy discussion
Right.
for the commission. And
Right.
so, we can work with you however you want to do
Right.
it, but we're trying to at least the policy objective of giving a little more flexibility while still maintaining with the rules and what the commission has said already.
Okay.
So that.
Well, let's go ahead and
Yeah,
maybe
so,
come back to this.
We have in here that applicants can schedule 1 or more discussions with the IEB before the required scoping session. I want to put that out to potential applicants or people or entities that have submitted already. I am available. I will work with you. Just contact me and we'll help you through the process. So it doesn't have to be this mysterious scoping entity. We'll work with you on that process. We do have the requirement that 1 week prior to the required scoping session, applicants shall provide, if they have not done so already, a list of the entities and individuals the applicant believes are qualifiers, a list of entities having more than a nominal ability to exert control over the applicant entity, a list of entities owning greater than 5% interest, either voting or financial, in the applicant, or in an entity owning a 5% interest, either voting or financial, in the applicant. An organizational chart showing the upper-level positions held by individuals in each entity noted above, an ownership chart showing the owners of each entity noted above, and a list of entities and individuals for which the applicant is requesting a waiver under 205 CMR 11603 and the reasons for that request. Once we have that information, the process moves much more quickly. So if that has to be in 1 week prior to the required scoping session, the scoping deadline is December 17th. That means all those materials have to be in on or before December 10th. So that generally gives an outline. I can answer any questions, for the commission and/or Mr. Ziemba has some other notes on the deadlines.
Yeah, perhaps. So just if we could sum up there, that 5 weeks from now, you've got to have not only the 3 pieces in place at the outside, but some detail and some flesh on those 3 pieces in terms of the individuals or entities that comprise them. That's how it stands now. And,
correct.
or if we adopt the protocol that's contained on this slide, page 8. Okay.
That's right. So this slide begins, this addresses some of the points that, Chairman, I think you're looking at, getting a flavor of what's happening in the region to enable to take a look at the question we just talked about. So other key deadlines that are approaching, so as I noted, our RFA2 application date is March 27, 2015. And if you back out the 60 to 90 days that are required for review of host community agreements prior to a referendum, and also I've included in here the 10-day certification period for cities of referendums before they become official. So what we're looking at is December 17, 2014 deadline for the host community agreement if a community wanted a 90-day review, and January 16, 2015 with a 60-day review. And then the final step in here is the prior to March 27th, our regulations require applicants to submit an environmental notification form under MEPA. This is the first step in MEPA filings that outline the impacts of their facilities, and they must receive their certificate after review of that ENF filing. One thing I will note for you is, given the status of where we are, or what we perceive for applications, it is we will not likely have draft environmental impact reviews to review for these applicants, given how long it normally takes to go through the MEPA process and to develop your applications to submit to MEPA. So in comparison to our Region A and Region B reviews, Region C would be based on the environmental notification form rather than DEIRs that we were fortunate enough to have in the other 2 regions. I'm going to just give you a general flavor of what we're hearing in the region. I'm very happy to report that there's interest in Region C. It appears that there's significant interest in Region C. We may receive 1 or more applications by the December 2014 date. I cannot provide you with a guarantee that we're going to receive an application by December 1st, but based on what I'm hearing, I believe that it's likely that we'll receive 1 or more applications.
New applications?
Additional.
1 or more applications for Region C.
Beyond the one we already have.
I guess what I'm saying is that 1, I would include that in the 1 or more, but that 1 also has to meet the requirement of the 3 legs of that stool of operations and finances.
Which we will determine at a later time.
Correct. Yep. So, good point, that we've already, by September
already have
30th
one.
of 2013, we have their RFA 1, but it would have to meet the criteria of the new criteria as set out June 26th to proceed to RFA 2.
Right.
In general, in some conversations, we have heard that some operators have expressed some concern regarding the uncertainty caused by the referendum. Obviously, there was a significant question on whether or not gaming was going to proceed in the Commonwealth, and to especially operators that had not been before our proceedings here in the past, that did cause some concern to outside interests. And we've heard that some had been hesitant to spend significant funds advancing applications in advance of that referendum date. We have also heard that some have posited that there may not be enough time between the referendum and December 1 to promote the most robust competition. But I do note that we are hearing that applicants are putting together applications, or at least they're trying to put together their partnerships to meet that December 1st deadline. One other issue is that their Regency, obviously, it involves some complex questions that were not as much a key in the other regions, and notably the Wampanoag Casino proposal has caused some concerns for operators on how that would likely be reviewed by the Commission in the context of its decision to issue Region C. And then this has not been as much of a concern as it had been previously in the year, but we also still hear that the minimum capital investment required by the statute still does pose an obstacle given the risks and the nearby competition in the region. For more specificity, we did reach out to communities that had where there had been public reports of interest in a gaming facility. We heard from Fall River that they are still actively pursuing a potential application. One complicating feature is that there is a recall election that was just determined for December 16th. So there potentially might not be the same mayor on December 17th as there was prior to that. And although that would not have as much of an impact on the RFA 1 proceedings, that certainly would have an impact on the host community agreement. We've heard from New Bedford. We included the email in your packet, and they described some difficulties, as I just referenced, difficulties regarding the referendum and how that had an impact on their own planning purposes. A lot of what they described were impacts that dealt a little bit more with the RFA 2 deadlines rather than the RFA 1 deadline. Somerset is also actively pursuing a gaming facility, and Bridgewater has expressed that it continues to hope to work with Claremont and Claire Vest as they proceed in the application process. So for next steps, what we're recommending is that all those that are wishing to apply should contact the IEB as soon as possible. They certainly should contact the IEB by November 17th so that they can schedule the required scoping session. But as Director Walsh has pointed out, they should have all the conversations that they need, even in advance of the one required scoping session under the plan that is before you today. And our further recommendation is that the December 4th Commission meeting, the IEB can report on any RFA 1 applications it has received and the progress of its review of the substantial completeness of applications. Welcome any questions or discussion.
Anybody? When I hear you talking now, and as I've heard you talking a little bit over the last few days, I get the clear sense that there's a lot more going on than there has been, that apparently the referendum or something, maybe it's the fact, as usual, that we have a deadline in place, something has caused there to be a lot more interest. And at this stage of the game, we're very tentative about it, but it looks like there's a real shot that there might be some decent applications in Region C. Having said that, however, practically all parties are feeling under the gun to get it done in time, owing to, at least to some extent, the referendum and probably the tribal uncertainty. So, you know, our position in the past has always been to do basically everything we can within the rules and fairness to facilitate competition on the theory that that gets us the best deals for the Commonwealth, which has clearly worked out in the other, for the other licenses. And the question that I would ask everybody is, you know, should we, everybody, it sounds like pretty much everybody could use some more time. In the past, we've had people saying, please don't extend, even though they weren't really ready. They thought they were. Here, we don't have anybody saying, please don't extend. We have pretty much of a consensus that more time would be helpful. So I think we should just deal with that four square. Do we want to award more time, and do we need, if so, do we need to do it by a formal extension, or can we do it sort of by the administrative process that you've talked about? Now, I want to clarify one thing. If I remember correctly, we have a precedent of having applications in that we deem to be not substantially complete, but we've given people the time to correct. You know, if we don't, it's not a go, no-go. If you're not substantially complete, you're out. We've gone back to people and said, you're not substantially complete, you need to get us A, B, and C.
Right.
Am I right about that?
And my recommendation is that it's better to have it substantially complete on the front end.
Well, actually, let me just, we had that precedent, but we addressed that precedent most recently, as summarized here, by that discussion about substantially complete,
Right.
based on your prior recommendation.
Correct.
So the most recent precedent that applies was that whole discussion about substantially complete.
So would you say that we now have the precedent and effectively a standard that if you are not deemed substantially complete, you're out?
Yes.
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 Okay, all right. So if that's the case, then I thought maybe based on that precedent that I thought we had done before, that might be an alternative, that we could just be sort of loosey-goosey with it.
Yeah.
So that seems to be off the table. So I think we need to talk about, you know, do we want to add another month or so to Region 1, I'm sorry, to the RFA 1, and, you know, we wouldn't necessarily have to deal with RFA 2 now. There would be an implication for RFA 2. And I'm open for discussion, but I think that's really what we ought to talk about. To my mind, the little tweaking that you've offered within the present system, if substantially complete is really a go, no-go decision, I don't think that's enough. I mean, I think we should consider, you know, in the interests of promoting competition, which appears in good faith is starting to materialize, we should consider a grant of more time.
Is there a downside that you can, either one of you can articulate about providing an extra month?
I think that the only downside would be if one or more of the potential applicants were counting on meeting the deadline, and that somehow the additional time would somehow impact the competition in that regard.
Yeah, it's competition versus fairness, right? We've talked about fairness as well. We've had these dates out there for a while. We've extended that deadline twice, and among other things.
Do you have any sense of that? Can you give us, is there somebody that is very likely counting on that date that we would unfairly?
Well, I don't know. I think in some conversations that I've had, people are proceeding and they think that they will be able to meet the RFA 1 date. I don't know the extent of whether or not, how substantially complete they may be at the current moment versus what they anticipate to be by December 1st. So there's a lot of unknowns, unfortunately.
How is extending a deadline unfair, this initial deadline? Somebody spent a lot of time and effort to meet the deadline. That's granted. And they have an expectation that the deadline was real. That's That's a given. Now we say competition. We've always been a competitive, we've always been interested in competition. We know there's competitors out there, so we're going to extend the deadline to allow the competitors to come in. What might be, in some lexicon, viewed as unfair is we've deprived those who are able to meet the deadline of a monopoly,
It's fair.
right? And is the monopoly,
Or duopoly, or however many we're in on time.
yes, yeah, of the pool that wouldn't have existed, be it a pool of one or a pool of two, that would have existed had we held fast to this deadline. We've said, okay, that pool, we're going to expand the pool. We don't think that it's big enough, given the fact that we know that there's other people out there ready to jump in if we give them a little bit more time. I can understand how somebody would feel disappointed by that, but I don't know that it is unfair. The goal we're trying to serve, the master, mistress we're trying to serve, is the best deal we can get for the Commonwealth within an articulated framework. And if we have to modify the framework somewhat in order to achieve that goal, it seems to me it's not unfair to do it.
And the one factor which you have continually talked about was the referendum, and that just was decided this week. So that is that was an obstacle that just changed. So I think that lends itself to maybe another month if, in fact, others were holding off because they just didn't want to, invest in something that may not be real.
Could I ask another question, though, that's tied to this? Because we have extended the deadline a number of times now, right? So, and we're contemplating doing it again. What happens if the deadline comes and we're still not satisfied? Suppose, hypothetically, we had no applicants by the time of the new
Which
deadline.
is a possibility.
Right?
No substantially complete applicants, let's say.
No substantially completed.
By the new deadline.
By the new deadline.
Or this deadline.
Or, yes, okay. Or by this deadline. What do we do? Say, we've closed Region C?
We could always rebid Region C at a future time.
Right.
Yes, the answer is we change the deadline.
We might change more than the deadline. I mean, we might decide to do what Commissioner Zuniga has been talking about, which is change the
Change the capital investment
capital
amount.
investment requirements. That's the other thing within our control that would likely
Yes,
increase
but
competition.
we would also have to change the deadline.
Correct.
Right? So at a minimum, we'd have to change the deadline.
Right.
Which is what we're proposing to do here. I mean, we're not proposing, that's the idea being floated at the moment. So one way or another, if we don't get something that satisfies us, our alternative and our remedy is to extend the deadline. Maybe something else, but an extension of the deadline.
So why don't we wait until that deadline comes? Why do we have to continue to extend it for a third time?
We don't have to, but
Right.
if we extended it for a month, say, and, I mean, we certainly could hold fast and see what turns up by December 4th. We're getting good intelligence that there are other... No, it's always good intelligence. I mean, it might not be accurate, but it's good intelligence.
It's good intelligence as of right now.
That a slight extension would be meritorious, and it seems to me that to extend it a month it is a viable, sensible option. It's not a major. But
I'm not
that's
sure.
only one.
I think, I'm gonna counter that point, and I'm gonna repeat myself from prior meetings, but I think what's at play here, the lack of activity, albeit, however much activity you can see right up to the deadline, may be indicative of a smaller market with a unique dynamic of the potential of the tribe and a capital investment that, as we have heard from at least one applicant who exited this region, that said it was a big impediment to putting a deal together. And we've discussed this twice. I try to make the point that when we raised the bar, because that's what we did with the minimum capital investment, by excluding a lot of customary costs, we might have raised it too far for Region C. Region A and Region B, which were always the bigger markets, were able to meet it. But I think the whatever activity we are not seeing is closely tied to a smaller market and a capital investment amount that we have held constant, and a unique dynamic of competition in the future, nobody knows when, of a tribal operation paying no taxes.
We did engage in that discussion before, and that's going to be a very vigorous discussion if we revisit it again. I think this may be a product of precisely that the capital investment bar is too high. It may also be a product of what, on the face of it, we're hearing in today's report, i.e., uncertainty about the referendum and the potential applicants not being in a different place than the other applicants were in terms of how far they proceeded. If we extended this for a short period of time, which is all that we're presently being asked to do, and that we would at least eliminate the possibility that these that the pool of applicants is extremely small because of the amount of time between the end of the referendum and the time we've set and the deadline we've set for the applications. And so if we get a nice pool after an extension of a month, we wouldn't have to have that more difficult conversation.
Where does a month come from, by the way? Why would a month be enough, or is that what's being discussed here?
I'm not sure.
KG asked for a month. The KG email asked for a month, I think.
And didn't New Bedford ask for a short extension?
It did not specify how much time.
Yeah. Right.
No, there's no specification of a month.
If the commission is inclined to do that, I would just recommend that we stick with the preferred process then of the applicants being required to do that scope of licensing before submitting the IAB. If we're having some flexibility on the time, that's my preference. It really is a much more efficient process.
You know, as an alternative to this extension, we could remove this notion of substantially complete. I know that's not ideal for you, but if there's really an interest and there's anybody out there missing one of those three elements, would we rather not find that out sooner rather than later?
Yeah, I think that from my perspective as doing the investigation, ultimately what I want to avoid is that situation where I'm working with an applicant, it's like, oh, I'll get it to you. You know, weeks go by, those turn into months, and it's months later, and then it's 2 weeks before I'm doing the submit. Where is it? You know, I'm waiting for it. So in order to provide more of a professional product for the commission, having a complete investigation in a timely manner, setting a deadline where you have to have your whole package together, I think it really makes sense as far as the being able to accurately report out to the commission and fairness. So if you have two, say you have 3 applicants, if you have 2 that got all their deal together and have the 3 legs of the stool, and then one was missing one, and then we're delayed, and we're getting it, it's, you know, if they're expected to do this on the front end, we should hold them accountable for that.
Yeah, I'm persuaded by the fairness piece. I think that this isn't a situation where we want a placeholder. We want a complete application, and that is an issue of fairness if others were able to put the whole deal together.
I think, just was quickly, I think the month is kind of arbitrary. I think as a practical matter, we might say January 15th, if we were to do this, because, January 1st isn't a very good day to target, and because of the holidays and stuff, so it's a little bit arbitrary. But as a practical matter, I would say if we were to, what we ought to be considering is maybe mid-January rather than January 1st. Sorry.
I was just going to offer another potential alternative, which is to keep the current deadlines, but extend this substantially. So you'd have to file an application and the 400,000 by the deadline. Set a new substantially complete date of, say, January 15th, and move the RFA 2 date back by a month, so that we wouldn't see who was here. We would see a substantial expression of interest represented by a $400,000 payment, and we would have the substantially complete deadline, which the failing to meet which would result in the application being denied without further investigation, and the 400,000 is gone.
What's the gain of that? What would be the benefit of that approach?
Trying to achieve something we all could agree on.
Yes. Well, deadlines have a way of, getting the attention of people.
There's no question about that. I mean,
And if we continue to extend the initial deadline, this is an alternative that I really can go along with. The one that you just I'm disinclined to extend the first deadline a month or two, just the way it was described before. I've said already how I feel about the minimum capital investment, and I think if we really wanted to open the field, that's something that that we should consider. But we've already done that.
Functionally, I mean, I was obviously being facetious. Functionally, it would if there are a pool of applicants out there who really are hindered in getting the paper together, they've got an essentially completed deal. The time to get all the paper together and get the application formulated and get the scoping meeting done and do all that within the time between now and the deadlines that we've currently set. This would give them an opportunity to say, in essence, that I'm there, I'm gonna be, I'm serious enough about this, and I believe I can put the deal together if I've got another month to do it. So I'm gonna give you the 400,000, and here's my application, so much as I've gotten completed, and I understand my obligation is to get the rest of it done by the next date. And so we could find out who was in the pool, and whether we have to have that more difficult discussion, and without extending the deadline. For letting us know what the pool looked like.
But we already have one applicant in that region.
That is not complete.
Okay, which we can address with, either after December or by extending that substantially complete deadline. Like we did in Springfield, even one applicant can be assessed on the merits of its own application.
do you have any?
No, I like the proposal or suggestion put forward by Commissioner McHugh. I want to keep to the December 1st deadline, allows for some of that completeness of the application to maybe extended. And I came into today's meeting thinking if we were going to get to a discussion about it, extending the RFA 2 deadline out. I think in one of our previous submission rounds for Region C, we almost allowed 10 months between the RFA 1 application and the RFA 2 application. And I think that would get us closer in terms of some opportunities for the community to have more time to negotiate an agreement, maybe more time to complete the environmental MEPA ENF. For the RFA 1 process, I want to stick to the December 1st deadline, or the December deadline.
How does that affect the host community agreement if the clock starts ticking with an incomplete application?
Well, we'd have to move RFA 2 deadline.
Yeah.
I mean, we're
Yeah,
gonna, we'd have to move.
okay, so
Either-
we're-
Whatever we do, any one of these, we're gonna have to move the RFA 2 deadline.
Yeah.
I don't, to me, we ought to just either do it one way or the other. If to require people to put up $400,000, which is real money even for wealthy folks, that's a lot of money to put up if you don't know for sure if you've got an operator, you're not sure you can get the financing together. What I understood from your feedback is that this is not just a matter of paperwork. This isn't people saying, hey, filling out those personal forms take forever, I need more time to fill out the personal forms. This is people getting their deals together, and they're principal partners. And to my knowledge, we don't, to our knowledge, have a single deal together. We don't have one complete group that's saying, hey, give us time to fill out the forms. So to require people to put up $400,000 is just a harsh requirement that doesn't really serve any interest at this stage of the game. If we want to give and I agree with you completely that we've gone through this many times. It's the deadlines that get people to act. And if we don't have deadlines, they don't act. That's, commonplace in a lot of places besides here. But in good faith, it does sound like the referendum was definitive. It was a significant influence. It does sound like there's been a lot more happening out there in the last very, very few weeks and almost days. So we should just bite the bullet. I mean, the objective here is to create a competitive environment and to go a half step and require $400,000 for people who don't have their acts together doesn't add anything to the public purpose that I can see.
I would agree with that. I think if we're going to extend, I would like a substantially complete application all at once. I think it's cleaner for us that way.
All at once?
Well, I mean, if we move this deadline, then you have to submit a completed application.
Which one? The first or the second?
Well, the scoping meeting would have had to have been done, and it's got to be substantially complete at the deadline.
Well, I'm trying to relate it back to Commissioner McHugh's idea of extending the second.
I'm saying that I agree with the
You're not agreeing.
chairman
You're not agreeing with.
Agreed. I'm agreeing with the chairman that it's cleaner for me, in my mind, if we have one deadline, if we move it back, and then everything is due, and we know you have a complete deal. We're not out there saying we have 3 applications when 2 of them aren't complete. I just think it's cleaner all the way around to give people, in light of the referendum results, giving people a little more time, since at least 1 or 2 have asked for that, and then that's it. You have it completed, and you submit it, and we move on.
Although I want to put it behind, I think the notion that that there was a serious damper because of the referendum, I discount compared to the unique features of this region. The market size, the capital investment, and the tribe, I think, have a much bigger effect than the referendum in trying to put a deal together.
Well, why would there now be increasing interest, if that's the case?
So let's see it.
Pardon?
Let's see it. Let's get to the deadline and see what we get.
Why is there increasing interest?
Well, there's also been decreasing interest in the past, right?
Well, the question is how, is there increasing interest, or is this just a buzz?
Yes.
I mean, is the interest real? Is the interest real or realistic? And that's the question.
Let's find out.
That's a question. I'm not sure it's the question, but it's a question.
That's a question for me.
And part of the issue is to how do we best find out?
Any more thoughts? Do we want to put 1 or 2 options on the table and see where we come down?
Yeah.
You want to put yours, Commissioner?
Well, I would be in favor of, due to the referendum, and that has been a concern articulated by potential applicants, we we allow a short extension, but then stick to our substantially complete application requirements.
With the scoping in advance, and would you be willing to put January 15th?
Yeah,
as-
December, yeah, January
January
15th
15th.
is
So
appropriate.
just one technical note, under our current process, we require 2 weeks prior to the deadline for the scoping meeting, and 1 week prior to the scoping meeting, they have to submit all their materials to enable the IEB to review it prior to the scoping session.
So you're actually giving them about a 1-month extension.
If we go to January 15th, that is correct.
You're giving them a practical 1-month extension.
Exactly.
So their materials would need to be in approximately December 23rd or so, 24th or so.
Is there a second?
Well, wait a minute, are we fixed on the date yet? If we're going to do that, and somebody's got to get it in on December 22nd,
Right.
why not go to the end of January? If we're going to go this route.
Okay, by me.
And then move and I take it, part of your motion would also be to move the RFA 2 date back by 2 months.
The appropriate amount of time
Yeah.
that we would need on the other end,
And
yes. This would move the whole process back.
Right.
Well, so we move the RFA 2 date, just if we're trying to do guidelines for people, from the end of March to the end of May. All right?
Because now we're talking about the deadline going an extra 2 months, so it would be the 2 months, if that's your idea of going to the end of January, is what you're...
Yeah.
Right. He's just saying, move the whole thing 2 months.
I would just put out there for your consideration, once the IEB gets the RFA 1 application, we may get applications where we have prior entities are, involved in the process. That should be easy. If I get a completely new application with foreign entities and all that, I may be coming back to the commission with a recommendation on the RFA 2 deadline, just to put it on your radar screen, but I don't think we need to do anything about that today.
Right. Would you be okay to make it to the end of January?
I would be fine with that. I see the practicality of December 23rd, which is, either way, even the end of January, this would require work through a holiday season, frankly, so, but,
All right.
And we're not going to touch the RFA 2 date? Is that the...
oh, no,
No,
we would
we're bumping it.
move it
We're
the
bumping it.
appropriate 2 months.
The whole thing is 2 months.
Yeah.
But Karen is just saying, she's not going to really know how much time
Just
she
stay
needs.
tuned,
No,
that's
I-
all.
No, I get that. But at least tentatively, we're just going to move the whole thing back 2 months. That's what the motion is. Okay.
Do you have a second?
Yes, I'll second it.
Any further discussion?
I'm gonna vote against this and insert my little editorial that I think we are doing the same thing and expecting different results. And I think
That's the definition
the
of insanity,
definition of
right?
something like insanity.
You know, I appreciate that, and you may well be right, and I think, you may well have been right back a ways when you first brought up this idea. For what it's worth, I do think, one bidder said, if you'll change the threshold, include the cost of land, I'm in. If you don't, I'm out. We didn't, and they were out. Other folks have not, decided that that was a bar. Whether that's noise or not, we won't know until the end of the day. But I think, for what it's worth, it seems to me if that really were a bar, you wouldn't have people buzzing around. Why bother? They would be.
Or you would have a deal put together. There have been a lot of months to do this.
And I'm coming around to this, notwithstanding my interim, my alternative proposal, because I really think that the lowering the bar conversation that concept is very, very troublesome to me on a whole variety of ways. And I would like to really make sure that we need to have that conversation before we get into it. And so I think this is an effort in part to see whether we really need to have that conversation.
That makes sense.
Which anyway.
I know,
Which
you're already there.
We could have it if the deadline passes and we don't have anybody or substantially complete. Wouldn't that be a good opportunity on December 2nd?
We wouldn't know why we didn't.
Yeah, correct. This
Well,
way we'll know for
you'd have to
sure.
assume.
No, I think this,
Well, anyway, the market assessment, I thought, maybe I looked at it too much, but I thought we had it early from a while ago.
Once again, the public is getting the benefits of transparent public decision-making.
No, it's important, and these are important discussions.
Totally, very, very important discussions, and it's, anybody who thinks our outcomes are predetermined can see what's happening. Anybody else? More conversation? All in favor of Commissioner Cameron's motion to move both deadlines, move the whole process out by 2 months to, I guess that would be February 1st, technically, indicate by saying aye.
aye.
And that was that was Cameron, McHugh, and Crosby. Opposed?
No.
That was, you know who that was, Zuniga and Stebbins.
The naysayers.
Right. Okay, the motion passed 3-2.
So, Mr. Chairman, we can report at the next meeting the exact dates after going through the
Yeah.
scheduling software.
Right, right. Okay, and you will obviously convey this to whoever needs to be conveyed to. All right, it is now 1:10. We are done with item 6, and we will take a, how long? 45 minutes, is that enough?
Yeah.
45-minute break and be back here at 2 o'clock.